name is Tony Messenger, and he joins us every Tuesday and every Thursday. Good morning, Tony Messenger.
Whoa.
Oh, so you got the little trick seat
Morning,
there.
McGraw.
All right,
Kelly.
so
how you doing? Good to see you.
Well, good to see you.
I made it.
You made it,
I'm
yes. Your column about higher education and funding was, when I first started reading, I was like, oh my goodness, this is going to be a bunch of numbers. But
A lot of numbers.
A lot of numbers, but wow, it is shocking how much the state of Missouri has defunded higher education.
What spurred the column is 2 years in a row now, Governor Nixon has put out a news release after he signed the higher education budget in which he's bragged about how two things. This is the highest level ever of education funding, record funding for colleges and universities, and he's worked with the university presidents to freeze tuition, which is a good thing. Mm-hmm. Okay, but it completely ignores the actual reality of higher education funding, which is that 20 years ago, University of Missouri revenue was being funded by 62% of its revenue came from the state, and less than 30% came from tuition, meaning that parents and students were paying a much smaller amount than the state. The state was funding its state colleges and universities as the Constitution requires it to, at an adequate level. That word adequate is actually in the Constitution, as somebody pointed out to me yesterday. And now it's completely the opposite. Now, 52% of universities' revenue is coming from tuition, from parents and from students. And I forget the number from the column now, but a significantly less, smaller number is coming from the state. So the state has stopped funding education in the way that it used to. Another good example that shows that this idea that we're funding higher education at a record level, it just isn't true. In 1981, 16% of the state's budget went to higher education funding. That shows that, that was a priority. 16% of the state's budget went to higher education. Now it's 10%. So our priorities have shifted. And that money I didn't include in the column where all of that money's gone. Some of it's gone to Medicaid spending. A lot of it's gone to corrections. But we've shifted our priorities, and we're no longer funding higher education at the same level that we used to. Yes, the incremental dollars go up every year because of inflation more than anything else, but the actual priority that we are placing as a state on higher education is significantly less. And so what we've done in this state is we've passed a massive tax increase without a vote that's being paid for by people like me, who I've had a son graduate from the University of Missouri, or so many other middle class parents who are either paying in parent loans or their kids are paying in student loans. That's how we're funding college education right now. It used to be a state priority. It no longer is. And so I get offended when the governor does that because, as I pointed out in the column, like me, he's had a son go to the University of Missouri and had to pay those tuition bills, I'm assuming, as I did. In some capacity. But here's the thing that really gets me mad about it. All day yesterday, the governor completely properly is ripping on the legislature for how they're changing the rules on K-12 funding. In the same way that they haven't funded higher education, the legislature has been it's about $400 million right now. $400 million underfunding, according to state law, our public schools, K through 12 education. There's a funding formula that says this is how much you have to spend on state schools to meet the constitutional standard. It's a law that was written in 2005 by Republicans. Matt Blunt was the governor. Charlie Shields was the state senator who pushed the bill. So it's a Republican bill that said this is how much we're going to fund education by. And every year over the last several years, folks like me have been beating up the Republican legislature and the Democratic governor because they never fund the K through 12 schools as much as they say that they're going to. And so right now that's about $400 million underfunded. And so what the legislature has done is the legislature has said, you know what? We're tired of getting beat up for underfunding schools, so we're going to change the rules. So they passed a bill that just rewrites a little part of the formula that basically says if this bill becomes law, we're no longer underfunding schools by $400 million. That $400 million gap, it just goes away. They just rewrite the law so it goes away, so people like me can't say they're underfunding schools anymore. So the governor gets offended over this sort of shenanigans,
right,
and is all over the place yesterday, and he's completely right, calling out the legislature for underfunding schools.
Right.
Well, they're doing the same thing on higher ed. I just want the governor to be consistent. Our legislature, our state as a policy has decided to stop investing in things. We are one of the lowest taxed states in the country in almost every category when it comes to state funding. And so our schools suffer, our roads suffer. We've decided that we're not going to invest things anymore. This is why our economy is where it is. And our legislature needs to hear about it. And our governor should be number one out front all the time, beating them up over it because it's just wrong.
I would love to see in dollars and inflation what a credit hour cost in 1970, 1980, 1990 versus what a credit hour costs today.
I got an email from a guy yesterday who graduated from the University of Missouri Law School that said his law school tuition, I believe he was talking about one semester. I'm quoting from an email now, so I'm going to be slightly off.
Right.
But his law school, one semester of law school, cost him $661. This would have been in the 70s.
Yeah.
And the proper comparison is this. I've talked to people in my age range. I'm going to be 50 this year. By the way, happy birthday to my wife who turns 40 today. It's not Cinco de
she's a
Mayo.
little cougar.
It's Cinco de Marla.
Oh, okay. She's a cougar.
Yeah, she is. And has the pictures to prove it. But anyway, that's another story. So people my age who went to the University of Missouri and probably a little bit older than me talk to me about how they were able to work one part-time job while they were at the university and pay their tuition.
Right.
And they didn't have student loans and their parents didn't have loans. That's no longer the case. And I use myself as an example because I'm the one I know best. My son graduated a couple of years ago. He's a Marine officer now. The Marines helped pay for his university education, but he still had student loans when he graduated, and I still have parent loans that I'm paying. Now, part of that is my own financial responsibility,
right,
maybe not making the best decisions along the way, and the way that our system is set up where that easy loan money is there to get. That's part of the problem. But the point is, 20, 30 years ago, our state university was a realistic option for middle-class kids without their parents having to take out a loan on their house.
Middle class or working class kids.
Yeah.
You don't necessarily have to be a middle class kid,
They
a
could
working
go,
class kid.
they could work, maybe take out a little bit of student loan and get the job done and come out of the university and try to get, a job and go on with their that promise no longer exists. And part of it's because our economy has changed, the global economy and everything else. But I still believe the biggest part of it is our state has decided we no longer prioritize funding our schools. We no longer want to be a state that says to our students and says to the rest of the states around us, we're going to kick your butt by educating our kids. We're going to invest in educating our kids and watch the jobs and watch the economy come. All the studies say that works. Our state has decided to give up on that promise.
Tony Messenger, St. Louis Post-Dispatch columnist here every Tuesday, Thursday, and we can read you at stltoday.com.
Every Sunday, Monday, Wednesday, Friday.
Ladies and gentlemen, he's our buddy. Tony, thanks for coming in.
Good to see you.
828, Big 550.